Hello everyone. From now on, we'll try to upload a concept every week, starting with today. Today, we'll be focusing on the intricate anatomy and the functional interplay between hypothalamus and pituitary. I found this topic quite confusing for people when we used to study our anatomy and physiology. So I chose this topic. From now on, from the next week onwards, we can you can drop your required topic in the comment box, and we'll try to upload a video on the same. Starting with the hypothalamus, you can see that the hypothalamic nuclei are scattered in third ventricle, and there are quite a many of them. The one pointing out anteriorly is paraventricular. All of these are named after their location. The one which is above the optic chiasma is the supraoptic. The one which is located ventrally and medially is the ventromedial, and the one which is in close relation to the infundibulum, pituitary infundibulum, is the arcuate or the infundibular nucleus. The one which is a bit medially but more dorsally is the dorsomedial, and the one which is posteriorly is the posterior nucleus. So these are the principal nuclei of hypothalamus as seen in sagittal section, and you can also see the relationship between the hypothalamus and the pituitary. The hypothalamic nuclei play an important endocrine role, and which will be discussed below. To remember the endocrine role of the hypothalamic nuclei, the endocrine role of the hypothalamic nuclei can be remembered by this scar diagram, where you can see that we have anteriorly the radiator, whose function is to cool the car. Similarly, the anterior nucleus of hypothalamus regulates the cooling of the body. The suprachiasmatic nucleus is present near the sunroof of the car, and hence it plays a role in circadian rhythm. More laterally, you can see the fuel cap, the role of which is to fill the fuel, which is the cap will be closed after satiety, after filling the fuel for the car. More medially, we can see the fuel tank, whose role is to take up more food or fuel, that is basically hunger. Posteriorly, you can see there is exhaust, which plays a role in heating the body. These are some of the principal nucleus of the hypothalamus, whose functions can be remembered by the scar diagram. Rest of if you remember these 5 functions, it will help you in answering the MCQs. Moving on to the sagittal view, where you can see the interplay between hypothalamus and the pituitary. Anteriorly in red is the anterior pituitary, and posteriorly in a bit lighter color is your posterior pituitary. So what is happening here is supraoptic hypothalamic nucleus and the paraventricular hypothalamic nucleus are having their axonal termination directly into the posterior pituitary. So this tract is called as supraoptico-hypophyseal tract, as the tract starts from supraoptic nucleus and ends into the posterior pituitary or the hypophyseum. Also, there are certain other tracts which enter the nucleus, as seen here. Arcuate infundibular nucleus also sends its tracts through this. So all of the hypothalamic tracts enter into the hypophysium or the pituitary through the hypothalamophysial tract. Other than that, you need to remember certain other anatomical landmarks, like the hypothalamic sulcus of the cerebrum is present superiorly, lamina terminalis is present anteriorly, and mammillary body is present posteriorly to the third ventricle. Pituitary is made up of, anterior pituitary is basically made up of three parts. The first part here is the pars tuberalis, the thin rim of stalk of pituitary present between the anterior and posterior pituitary is the pars intermedia, and the much more predominant part is the pars distalis. There is also a non-functional fibrous trabecular tract part present in the pituitary. Also need to remember is the tuber cinereum median eminence, which forms an intricate connection between pituitary and hypothalamic nuclei. So if they give you a sagittal section of a radiological image, please remember that posterior lobe of pituitary will be bright, while anterior lobe will be like rest of the brain. So the important things to remember is the third ventricle projects through two recesses near the pituitary. The upper and more anterior one is the supraoptic recess, and the inferior and more posterior one is the infundibular recess. Other important things to remember are the mammillary body and the tuber cinereum. Also remember that there is a part of cavernous sinus basically which acts as cellular diaphragm. We'll be speaking about it much later. So in the coronal sections for the same, you need to remember that pituitary is located between the two cavernous sinus as seen here in the sella turcica. The cavernous sinus itself is an important question which can be asked. I'll just briefly discuss the important structures related to cavernous sinus. The ICA passes through the cavernous sinus and is one of the most important contents of the cavernous sinus. Just below the ICA is your sixth nerve, the abducens. And laterally along the cavernous sinus wall, from above below are third nerve, fourth nerve, V1 which is ophthalmic nerve, and V2 which is maxillary nerve, the branches of trigeminal. Inferior to the sella turcica is the sphenoidal sinuses as seen here, and much more inferiorly is your nasopharynx. So the important thing to remember is any cavernous sinus aneurysm or cavernous segment aneurysm of ICA or any cavernous sinus pathology, the first important structure to be involved is the CN6 abducens because of its close location within the carotid, within the cavernous sinus, also inferior to the carotid ICA. So radiologically, this is how your pituitary will look along with the cavernous sinus as shown here with the contents. Other important thing which I had mentioned there is the cellular diaphragm. Cellular diaphragm basically acts as a continuation of medial cavernous sinus walls. Moving on further, so we all know that anterior pituitary produces the hormones while posterior pituitary merely acts as a pathway for the hypothalamic hormones to be secreted into the bloodstream. So how exactly does this happen? This is your anterior pituitary. As we know, pituitary is an endocrine hormone. So what exactly are endocrine hormones? They secrete chemical messengers directly into the bloodstream. So how does this work? Basically, the hypothalamic neurons secrete inhibitory and secretory neurons into the primary capillary plexus located in the pituitary infundibular stalk, and through the primary capillary plexus they are drained into through the long portal veins into the secondary papillary plexus located in the anterior pituitary. These are then stored here, and depending on the needs of the body, they act to stimulate pituitary cells, the hypophyseal cells, to secrete respective hormones. So basically, the hypothalamic inhibitory or secretory hormones, for example TSH, which is a thyroid stimulating hormone, acts actively on the hypophyseal cells stored within the pituitary, anterior pituitary, to secrete when, as and when required by the body. So these hypothalamic nucleus are hypothalamic messengers are basically present, stored in the secondary capillary plexus. How exactly is posterior pituitary different from the anterior pituitary? Is that the supraoptic nucleus, which lies within the scattered within the third ventricle, and the paraventricular nucleus, which lies scattered within the third ventricle, have their axons terminating directly into the posterior pituitary. So there is no intermediate primary capillary plexus or the portal vein interplay here in posterior pituitary. The axons themselves of these tracts of the nucleus terminate into the posterior pituitary, and they secrete their respective hormones, oxytocin and antidiuretic hormone, into the inferior pituitary hypophyseal artery, through which they are distributed to the body through the systemic veins. So these oxytocin and ADH are secreted directly via these tracts, which end in posterior pituitary as and when required by the body, and hence posterior pituitary itself does not act as a separate secreting function. It merely is an anatomical pathway for the hypothalamic nuclei to secrete their substance into the bloodstream. So that's all we have from today. Hope you enjoyed and understood the basic anatomy or the important functional role play between hypothalamic nuclei, pituitary. Also understood the radiological aspects related to this. Other than that, you can text us at 8095806118 to buy our 20th notebook, which has recently stormed into the social media because of its high strike rate. We have achieved a great perfect strike rate of nearly 75% in all the four exams, in all the recent four exams, in just the content of 700 pages, which are high yield page contents made during my NEET preparation, and added many more image based colored images in our edition 2. Edition 1 had surpassed more than $1,500, and edition 2 is now on its way to reach $500. If you need any queries, you can text us directly.